I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor, and I moved from Miami all the way to California during my supervised internship, supervised practice, and I started working at a community mental health center in LA, which was very eye-opening. I got a lot of experience there. And then COVID happened, and they were also having financial issues. So they were in
The clinic.
The clinic, yes.
Yep. Okay.
So they called it, they were in the red. And so in order for them to compensate that for the rest of the fiscal year, they normally we had to bill like 27 hours a week, plus going to meetings and documentation and whatnot. And then they had us do 32, 36. And that was unreal. Unreal.
Pay?
What's that? Same pay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Same pay. So I was like, heck no.
Yeah.
Heck no. My time is more valuable and my energy.
Yep.
So I got burnt out and I took a medical leave. And that was for, I would say, like 3 months.
And this was still in 2020.
Yes.
You
2020.
were living in California where everything was extremely fucked.
Yes.
Yeah.
When I started just settling in, it was awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then COVID happened and I was in a fresh relationship as well. And even during COVID, we moved in together. So that was chaotic too. And yes, so I took some time off and I was like, what do I want to do? I don't want to go back, but what other options do I have? I'm not ready to start my own practice yet. I don't have a large clientele. So, I thought, what's a baby step? And then I just started browsing and I found this private group practice that was fully remote. And they had several locations all over California. They had some in Texas, I think in Arizona and Nevada. And then they were starting to open up other ones in the East Coast. But I was like, okay, this is cool. Like I want to be able to manage my own time. So they gave us that flexibility. And it was great at first. But then I started to notice that I got burnt out because I was having 8 sessions in a day.
Yeah.
And I had like maybe 5 to 10 minutes in between them. And so I was fried by the end of the day. And trying to then go to the gym, trying to attend to my relationship, trying to navigate the 2 businesses that I opened up with that relationship, which I don't recommend until later on. If you're even going to do that. Yeah. So the relationship collapsed. I was very depressed, very anxious, very depressed because we were just feeding off of each other's childhood wounds and no one to blame. It was just, we got to work on these things. And it was just too intense all at once.
Yeah.
And this was 2021, end of 2021. I started going to my now current therapist and I continue seeing him. And I just made a massive shift. Even like while I was still living together with them. And what else? I still was working for this other company. And then I moved out early 2022. And it was very difficult. It was very terrifying because I thought, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to survive on my own? Even though I had done it before the relationship. But it's like all of my core negative beliefs had resurfaced and I felt almost helpless. But I took the leap anyway. And after a few months, after I'd moved out and I was settling into myself and I found like this whole community, which, like Lauren and Dylan and you as well. And it was really the most healing part was not just like my own self-work and going to therapy. It was also connecting with people and being my authentic self because I felt I wasn't able to do that in my relationship. I was in the beginning, but then I lost myself. And I think a lot of us do that. And yeah, I just found so much liberation and so much freedom, which I was wanting in the relationship, but I felt more so like imprisoned.
I feel like, I don't know, I don't know the best way to describe this, but a lot of people I've talked to can kind of say the same thing, but it feels like after COVID is almost a completely different life. Like anything before COVID, it feels like I don't even recognize that person who the memories I associate with, right? It's like, obviously that was me, but anything before 2020 is just, it feels like a lifetime ago.
It does.
And anything after, I'm like, okay, like that's me. That's who I am. Those are like the fresh memories. And like what you said, where you were going through like these depressive periods where you felt kind of lost, then you took a risk, you took a leap, you wanted to do something different, you found yourself, and then now you're in a really good place, or like you're at least on the path to being
On
in
the
a
path.
really good personal place. And honestly, I feel like a lot of people can probably say the same thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was because of COVID. I don't know if COVID was just like that impetus to like make everyone realize just how fragile their life can be. And then it's like, oh shit, maybe I don't wait until next year to do this thing that like I've been putting off. Maybe I do it now because I don't know when the next opportunity I'm going to have to start my business will be. Like, it's not worth me just continuing to sit in my own misery at this job that I've hated for the last 2 years, or this relationship that I've been miserable in. And a lot of people that I've talked to after like post-COVID kind of say the same thing. And it's interesting that everyone kind of has that same experience where there was just like this immediate sense of overwhelm, depression, anxiety because of everything that was going on, obviously. But then whenever we realize like, okay, maybe we are eventually going to get back to normal and this will eventually fade away, then it was like, all right, like I need to do something different. I need to do some shit for myself. But I kind of want to backtrack because you and I have known each other for how long?
Oh my gosh, since
2017,
2017.
Yeah. And
oh my gosh, yeah.
It's been a really fucking long time. And back then you were doing a lot of work with 3DMJ, right?
Still am.
Yeah, so you still are. Okay, that's dope. I didn't even realize that you still were doing that. So do you kind of want to like talk about what that is, like maybe what 3DMJ is for one, for people who don't know what that is, and then also kind of like the work that you do for them and what you've done in the past?
Yeah, so 3DMJ, 3D Muscle Journey. I would say they're like the OGs of natural bodybuilding, and they provide coaching for general lifestyle clients, powerlifting clients, and physique competitors. And they're just like, they're family. They're a family to me. And we have Eric Helms, we have Alberto Nunez, we have Jeffrey Alberts, we have Brad Loomis, we now have Ben, we now have Andrea Valdez, and Steve Taylor, Nick Licamelli, and myself. So we all have our own strengths. And sorry, I said Ben, it was Brian Miner. My bad. Oh my goodness. So yeah, so they're fully remote, fully online. I don't know if they have actual in-person clients. I know they show up for the shows and competitions. But the work I do, I'm a mental health consultant, and I started that position about 2017 when I first was officially licensed. And what I do for them is provide content. We go through a cycle. So I'll do blogs, I'll do podcasts. We used to do kind of like Instagram posts as well. So I could do like clips for them. And what I also do is I have like a survey in the intake form to assess like if someone is appropriate to be able to take on these physique goals and if they're healthy enough. And then if anything comes up during the process that the coaches are working with them, we'll touch base and we'll see like, okay, what's going on? And they'll present to them, hey, this is an option for you. Like if you need some extra support, and they'll pass them along to me. And if the client feels comfortable, I can collaborate with the coach as well. It's not necessary, but can be helpful. And I actually discovered them, man, in the YouTube days when they were doing just like straight blogs, like this is the day in the life with Matt Ogus, and they were all stationed out in Sacramento. Chris Lovato was part of that too. And so I discovered them through that. And I first touched base with Andrea Valdez, who was not a coach at that time. She was just a client. And we just started, messaging back and forth, and we developed a relative friendship as much as you can online. And then one day, like, we met up, started hanging out, and then our friendship started developing more. And she offered to me if I could help her and support her in her business, because she had her own thing going on. And so it was more so just like background website work, Instagram posts. And later on, she was brought onto the team, and she just told them about me eventually. And then I started doing the same thing for them, for the muscle and strength pyramids, just more back end website work. And later on, they started to get to know me better and realized, hey, we actually need this in our team, like your skills. And here we are today. Yeah. It's been a long journey.
Yeah. So like, could you give an example of kind of like what you would do with a client who might come through, put on the intake form, something that would raise some alarms as to
red flags?
Yeah. Some red flags as to like maybe their unreadiness to compete and to like really jump into like, the things that physique sports necessitate as far as extremes go. Like what would your role be in that capacity, to be kind of like stepping in and assisting with someone who, might just need a little bit more support in that role?
Yeah. Well, surprisingly, I actually haven't had any clients that have, well, actually potential clients that have applied and red flags have been raised. So I don't assess the intake. It's more so the coaches. And then if something comes up, they pass it along to me. But what has happened is they'll be working with someone long-term, and they recognize, we're getting stuck in a pattern, and, they're overeating almost every weekend, or they have a lot of negative self-talk. And so the coach will talk about it with them. And if it is something they're comfortable with, they'll connect me with them. And we just have like a consultation call. We'll have a discussion about what's been going on, what they're looking for, and if they're open to having therapy. If it's someone outside of the state that I'm licensed in, which is California, I'll do life coaching with them. And depending on what they're presenting with, and if it's too severe, then I'll refer out. But most of the time, it's not. I'll start like weekly sessions with them, meet with them for about 15 minutes, and create goals, see what the presenting problem is, how is it impairing their functioning, and figure out what direction they want to go in. And ask them, if they've had a history of therapy, how has that worked out for them? And what are some roadblocks that are happening in the moment?
Yeah. Do you feel like the negative self-talk is probably one of the bigger issues?
Very common.
Yeah. And I would imagine that the majority of the clients that you get passed through like the 3DMJ side are probably competitors that are the more like high level, like they're going through like these cyclical periods of, surplus deficit competing. And there's just a lot going on there that could potentially lead down that road of having those inner battles. But what do you think are some good strategies as far as negative self-talk goes, or like people that find themselves in those same patterns of getting really down on themselves, or having low self-esteem, or wanting to compete, or wanting to hang on to like fitness as almost a means to improve their self-esteem, rather than trying to do some like, inner work or different type of some therapy to figure out like what the root cause of that might be. Like what are some strategies that you might be able to just kind of like blanketly give to people who might be struggling with some of those things, which I know that's difficult because it's all very difficult. All different outside of, just like reach out to Amanda, but
yeah. Man, that's an excellent question. It's very difficult to assess, but it usually stems from core negative beliefs and a message that they internalize at some point in their lives and started subconsciously, just out of adaptation and survival in that environment that they were in, to take that on. And most of the time, they're no longer in that environment anymore, and it's no longer serving them, like this adaptation. And so they find themselves in that loop. But stepping outside of that pattern is terrifying, because who am I without this? And even just opening up the door of what is the potential, what can be there. They've never even, most of the time, even considered that.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's so heady, it's so intellectual. We have no idea what's going on below that.
Yep.
What's happening in the body. And oftentimes it's a chemical, it's just a hormonal addiction, if you will. I don't want to use addiction, but it's a tendency.
Yep.
Because it further reinforces those beliefs. As much as we say, like, I don't want to be XYZ, it's actually, the other side of the coin is you believe you're that.
Mm-hmm.
So you're trying to avoid it and look at it and feel it versus moving towards something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that you could probably give examples of something like that where, like you said, don't want to use the word addiction, but like the tendencies that people have towards chasing different things or trying to reinforce beliefs that they have. One of them would definitely be the negative self-talk, the self-deprecation, yes, where they want people to say, no, you're not that. No, like you're so pretty. No, you're in such good shape. No, you're so strong. Like you're going to do so well at your competition. Mm-hmm. Like they want other people to say that, and they like put themselves down. But I'm sure that you've been around people who are just perpetually negative. Perpetually. And like I've run into this issue before with certain clients where I'm like, I can't coach you anymore if you're every single check-in just going to be negative, mm-hmm. negative. Like we need to
never enough.
Exactly. It's like we need to address this, because like as a coach, I'm like, man, this is rubbing off on me. Like I don't even want to open your emails anymore, because I know
that's a sign.
Yeah, I know what I'm going to see. Like this is challenging for me to navigate. And for those types of people who are just perpetually negative, you feel like that's more so something that is just like deeply rooted inside of them. And like there's obviously nothing that they can do in the fitness space, physically, aesthetically,
it's a Band-Aid.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's what I've found too. There are a lot of people that I feel like get into bodybuilding with the hope that bodybuilding will solve their self-esteem issues, because they think that their self-esteem issues are rooted in their physique. They're like their dislike of their physique. But most of the time it's way deeper than that.
Way deeper.
And that's something I found too. And I'm sure that like something like the intake form that you guys would be giving out would be, asking questions along this of thinking. But yeah, like that's just something that I've had conversations with people in the past, just about like, when are people ready to compete? Like, when do you know your clients are ready to compete?
Yeah.
Like, you know that you're ready to compete. And it's amazing how the answers are never anything really to do with physique or body composition. Like mentally, like psychologically, where is this person? Are they psychologically ready to compete? Mm-hmm. And that's a disqualifier more often than physique even is, I found.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's never, because we can get that physique that we've been chasing, and it's still not enough. Why? And another point that I like to bring up with my clients is you're not answering the questions, the very important questions that you're asking yourself. Why am I like this? Why can I be XYZ? And they stop there. And I think that's important for someone that's like perpetually negative to explore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where do these beliefs come from?
And yeah,
are they even yours?
That's an interesting
That's question. The one. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that I 100% agree with, just because like, even for myself, like if I really start exploring like why I believe certain things the way that I do, or why I have certain conceptions about myself in the world. And if I really trace that back, it's like, it's because I, like someone who I trusted, or someone who I I looked up to
Yes.
whenever I was young believed this thing or said this thing, right? And it's amazing how things just get stuck in your psyche, and you can't really unroot them without doing a lot of
work.
a lot of fucking work. And bodybuilding doesn't solve those problems.
No. It's just like getting money or getting property or this certain relationship. It's all a parallel. Even substance abuse.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's just a different mechanism, different Band-Aid brand.
So I actually didn't have this question written down, but because you mentioned substance abuse, I have a really random question for you.
Go for it.
I'm curious as to know your answer to this. So why do you think that people who are really, really into bodybuilding, fitness, like they're heavily into that lifestyle, like they love it, they live it, maybe don't compete, but like just, very serious about it. Why do you think that demographic is also very into taboo things? Like whenever, and
I knew you were going to go there.
Like substance abuse, body modification. So like tattoos,
piercings,
and then sexual taboos.
So
why do you think those things are correlated in the same type of populations? Do you have an answer to that? Because
this is just my conceptualization of it. I believe it's because there is so much rigidity that is necessary to be a competitor or to continue this lifestyle. That pendulum needs to swing. It needs to balance out, just like when you take a substance, doesn't matter what it is, you get that high, whether it's dopamine, serotonin, whatever it is, and it needs to balance out, and you're going to have that crash. So the pendulum swings, and we got it. That energy has to go out somehow. Just like, it could be the rigidity with, tracking your macros every single day to the T. And then on the weekends, you go all out, you binge.
That's a really interesting way of putting it too, because like I've thought of that. I've thought of one aspect being kind of like the center of attention peacocking nature that people really enjoy whenever you're in bodybuilding at a high level, whether it's competing or whether it's just like, again, you recreationally taking it serious at your gym, whatever, where people kind of like being that center of attention. So like for me, that more easily goes along with like body modifications, like tattoos and piercings, where you kind of make yourself even more so that notable figure. But then it's like the drug use, I'm like, okay. And for people who don't know, maybe this is just like completely glossing over a really big thing, but it is prevalent, rampant.
It's rampant
in the fitness world to be really into drugs, really into sexual taboos as well.
Yeah.
And
even alcohol.
Yeah. It's like it's needing something to give them that like dopamine rush. And it's always something I found hilarious and really interesting, because like you said, the rigidity that's needed to be really, really good at bodybuilding contrasted with like festival lifestyle.
It's wild. It's feral.
It's feral. That's such a good way of putting it. It's feral, and it's just like letting loose. It's the opposite of what you'd imagine bodybuilding to be, but it's the same people doing both of them. And for me, that's always been funny how it's like the bodybuilding crowd has become like the festival crowd.
Yeah, it's a thing. Like
it is.
We get festival ready.
Yeah, it is. It is. But no, I was just curious as to know what like your thoughts on it, because
I also think I love this. I love that you brought this up. I also think it's because there's little integration with who you are as a person. So it's either you're identifying as I am a bodybuilder and whatnot, and then I just need to relax at the end of the week or whatever it is. Just like someone that hates their job. I'm gonna go ham at the bar later. I'm gonna slam a bottle of wine and watch I don't know, Scandal or something. So I think most of us are trying to find a release of some sort, and it's usually temporary. And I think some people can just go too ham with it, and they end up shooting themselves in the foot, but they haven't found a way to integrate that release, that letting go in a day-to-day, practice.
Yeah.
Like, do we really need to go to a festival all the time to find that? Probably not. I mean, it's fun. I love it. And
Easier.
I went through it. It's easier. Yeah. I mean, it's such high energy, plus the music, plus the community. But I recognize for myself that, okay, how can I create this in my day-to-day life without hurting myself, without engaging in substances, or without, 3-day festival like that? That's very taxing on the body. Just if you were to go sober.
Dangerous sex practices. I mean, that's
dangerous sex practices. Yeah.
You see that a lot.
What am I looking for actually? Is it really this activity, or is it an experience within myself?
Yeah. And there's also the part about people who are very serious in bodybuilding or fitness that I think moderation is something they struggle with too. So it's really easy for them to be all in on bodybuilding, and then they get like a taste of something else that gives them a similar emotional reaction or similar dopamine rush. Like, let's say again, substances. They get a similar high from taking a substance that they do from going to the gym. And they're like, oh shit, like this is great. Let me go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah.
Let me do this again. It's like, then that leads down this crazy path. Or like maybe sex again. Like they get that high from sex and then they just go down that path. But no, I actually 100% agree with you. I don't know that there's one answer to this. It's just, that parallel has always been really interesting for me to observe, being obviously in it, but also observe other people too, because there are a lot of people that have been clients of mine or I've been friends with who I've started as friends with them because of fitness. Like that's the association. And then I see them slowly transition into, okay, now they're going down this other alternative lifestyle. Now they're almost away from fitness, which is what I knew them for. And now they're like a rave bro. Like that's all they do is go to raves and do drugs, And that's very, like I said, very interesting to me to have observed. But you did mention something a second ago, and it's kind of like escaping my mind now.
Okay. Well, I just thought of when you described that for a friend, it's almost like a codependent relationship.
Interesting.
You lose yourself in that.
Yeah.
Like I need you, and without it, I'm not enough.
Interesting.
So like identifying with it.
Yeah. And
it's just like bodybuilding.
It is. And I think that bodybuilding on its own can be obviously so constructive, because I think the rigidity and the self-control that you learn from bodybuilding can carry
more so discipline.
Yeah, discipline. I guess that's the overarching better word than rigidity. But the discipline, the routine orientedness, I think that those are all like really, really good things that someone can learn from bodybuilding. But the rigidity, I think, is where people start to falter. It's just like with anything in this world, the more that you are restricted from doing something, more that you want to do more of it, and then you get a little bit of it, a little bit of freedom, and you just go completely off in that direction. But again, bodybuilding can be very constructive or it can be very destructive for people. And you've obviously seen this at a high level because you've worked with a lot of competitors and you're on the mental health side of things, which in a lot of ways is way more difficult than anything that I would be doing or anything that like a macro coach or prep coach would be doing. So like whenever you have someone come in who is really struggling with certain things, and that could be body image, that could be like binge eating, it could be anything, right? What are some of like the first questions that you might ask someone who you meet for the first time, just to kind of get a good sense of where their headspace is at in that moment, and where you can kind of go and leapfrog into the session or like the first place to potentially start helping them?
Yeah, it's usually almost always, why are you here?
Yeah,
and why now? Because I can bet it's been a long time that they've been engaging in these. You can call it unhealthy behaviors or just stuck in this rut.
Yeah.
So why now?
That's an interesting question. Like the timing is definitely something that it has to be right,
They have to
because
be right. Yeah, they have to be ready.
it was especially with therapy. Like I know that myself personally, like that I go through periods where like I know that I need, like I think I always need personally, I always need therapy. And like even you, like you've been my therapist before.
Yeah, seriously.
So like
I need therapy. I love
yeah.
going to therapy. That's what brought me into the industry,
Well,
my own experience.
I'm sure that a lot of people can relate to the fact that like even at its base, therapy being someone to talk to, it like stripped away of everything else. It's just someone to talk to, someone who can be unbiased in their listening and their feedback. Everyone can benefit from that at all times. Literally every moment of every day, having that is beneficial for all of us. But I think that we all also come up with good excuses as to like why we don't need it at that time. Something happens in our lives that like expedites that timeline. We're like, okay, now I'm ready. Now I know that I need this. I can't keep pushing this off. So I like that you brought up like the why now part. Right. And like what would, after the why now, after these questions, like, you know, start developing some kind of treatment plan for someone in this situation. No, what are some of like the first things that you might resort to? Let's say you have a competitor come in who is dealing with some kind of like body image issues. They're stuck in a rut. And like what would be like the first things that you go to start helping them in that situation?
Yeah, I would definitely want to get just an assessment of their worldview, their perspective, because that's going to let me know what kind of direction to go in. Oftentimes it's like, okay, I want a relationship or I want XYZ. And it's still very focused on like having a physique goal. Yeah. It's having a certain outcome. And that's just the surface level of the pattern. It doesn't matter if you get that thing, if you get the $1 million boat or whatever, you're not going to feel it because it's not about that. It's more so the experience. It's a state that you want to get in and like an internal sense of equanimity and peace and acceptance. So sometimes I'll have to like redirect them and assess their own values and assess if it's their values, their own values, or it's the values that they've been internalized from society or their parents or any sort of a cultural structure. So I'll have that baseline, and then we start working through identifying the patterns, identifying the core beliefs. Most often than not, most humans are experiencing like, what is my purpose? Why am I here? Who am I? Am I enough? Am I going to be abandoned? Do I belong? Am I good or bad? So those are the very common ones that I work with or that I find. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So you find that like kind of stripped of all the surface level stuff, whether it's competing, whether it's relationships, whether it's work, you know, all the anxieties and stressors that come with that. You feel like underneath all of that, everybody has like an existential crisis that they need to they need to come to terms with.
We all do.
Yeah. And do you feel like a lot of that is like lack of purpose, lack of feeling meaning in life? Do you feel like that's a big one?
I think that's one of them. It's one of the big ones. And also the belief, especially now with this whole wave of, you know, self-help and healing and all that, which is great. It's been brought to mainstream. However, well-being does not mean you are going to be positive all of the time. It does not mean you are going to be happy. You know, the whole pursuit of happiness, that is false. A healthy life is going to have ups and downs. You're going to have challenges. Life is going to throw shit at you. What really matters and what makes the difference is how you are when those things happen, how you are with yourself, how you are in response to these things versus reaction, versus being on autopilot, versus just being in a state of nervous system dysregulation. That's what we want to shift towards.
And you kind of mentioned this because there's this wave of self-help. There's a wave of, I feel like, kind of recreational therapists that whether they classify it as therapy or influencers or life coaching or like spiritual coaching, whatever they want to call it, right? That kind of gets them around the legalities of what therapy should be whenever you have someone's emotions in your hands.
Right.
It's
huge.
A lot of responsibility. Yeah, it is. But what are some of the things that have really frustrated you about maybe your industry that you're in currently, or some of like the newer waves of popularity of, I hate to say popularity of like mental health awareness, because I think mental health awareness is a great thing.
Yes.
And removing the stigma around mental health, I think is a really great thing. But with things going mainstream, inevitably there are some negative aspects that happen because of it. So like, what are some of the things that you've seen that, whether it's
Great
again intrinsic to your industry or maybe just like outwardly, that you're seeing population wide?
One of the things that come to mind are if you have your own experience in therapy, that just means that, okay, I have all of the answers and I can help you.
Yeah.
False.
Yeah.
I don't even have all of the answers. Like, I am learning every day. I tell my clients that I learn from you. So I think a lot of people on social media, and I'm not casting shade on it, but I think we just need to overall have more self-awareness about what message we're putting out there. Because first of all, you're not really interacting with a human being yet. It's just like someone's going to see your page, someone's going to see your post, and they're going to have their own reaction to it and their own projections. And you're not able to move with that energy. You're not able to have sincere clarity. So I think a lot of things can be misconstrued. I think, just like we were talking about with substances, things can swing to a certain pendulum. So what I think of is like manifesting and, positivity and just no bad vibes, only good vibes. And I have a lot of resistance towards that, because that's the whole avoidance thing. Yeah. I'm not going to look over here because it's uncomfortable and I don't want it. So I'm going to just stick to this group. But you're actually just like denying a whole part of yourself. You're invalidating a whole part of yourself, or just a whole part of society.
And I can definitely relate to that, because I'm an optimistic person, but I feel like I'm also someone who is like a realist. And for me, it's kind of frustrating whenever people refuse to accept that there are bad things in the world, and there are times whenever you're going to feel really fucking shitty about your life and about where you are. You're going to have these like existential crisis moments where you're really, really, really struggling. And you can't just you can't always positive self-talk your way out of those things, so you can't always just manifest good energy out of nothing. Like it doesn't work like that, so that's definitely something that I get somewhat frustrated with, because my perception isn't that it's fake. It's just that it's like, again, a refusal to acknowledge what's actually happening there. And it's trying to put on like a public image that is not reflective of what reality is.
The persona. Yeah. It's an an act.
It can be. And, another thing for me that frustrates me is people using mental health as an excuse to continue shitty patterns.
Oh, absolutely.
And this has been something that I think become increasingly more aware of, especially like as I've dealt with my own mental health stuff in the past few years, is how easy it is to use that as an excuse to just continue to do stupid shit and be like a shitty person and like hurt people, right? It's very easy to be like, oh, well, like I'm like this, I do this because I am this, rather than like trying to fix the patterns and behaviors or work on those things to not be that person.
Right. Or because I'm a Pisces,
Oh my God. Yeah. Let's not even start. But like how often do you feel like people will take a diagnosis and try and run with that and use that as an excuse for their behavior, rather than trying to actually work on on rectifying that behavior or that diagnosis?
I've seen it before.
Yeah.
I've curated my clientele to not take on those clients, and usually they don't gravitate to me.
Mm.
But yeah, it's an overall lack of accountability, and it's an attachment to a certain identity because they're not ready to let go. They're not ready to move towards what they want because, that mental health diagnosis, if you will, has served a purpose for them. It's kept them safe.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not, it's still uncomfortable, it's still shitty. Most humans would prefer something that is known and familiar versus jumping into something that was probably better for them and unknown.
I feel like it also can be a sense of relief whenever someone is diagnosed, let's say is
Sure.
bipolar, for instance, right? Because it creates a sense of I'm not alone in this.
Mm-hmm.
So there is an ability to be almost like, okay, good. I knew that there was something maybe not normal about me. I hate to even say that word like that.
Right. Like,
yeah, you know what I mean. A little bit different about like how my brain works or how like I interpret the world. And then being diagnosed as bipolar, for instance, is almost like validating. It's like, oh yeah,
yes,
I am different.
I'm seen.
I'm seen. I'm different. It's okay for me to act like this because
Yes.
I'm bipolar, rather than wait a second, my actions, my behaviors, even though this is in the backdrop, are negatively impacting the people around me and my life. So maybe I need to figure out a way to manage this in a way that allows me to continue to improve my life and continue to like be around people that I love and that love me. It's again, like I've seen it happen a lot. I think that there was like a wave, especially like post 2020, where everyone was depressed, everyone was anxious. And I mean, to a degree, everyone is, right? Like it's a spectrum anyway.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking when you brought up the whole normal concept. Like, are you okay? Are you okay if you're normal? What's going on? Like, look at the state of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there is really a normal. Again, it's just I think it's all spectrum, right? And but after 2020, there was definitely a lot more understanding and acceptance that hey, we're all dealing with some shit right now. We're all kind of confused as to what's going on in life, and we're kind of confused as to like what the futures hold or what the future will hold. So maybe we're a little bit nervous about this. We have this angst that we all are living with at the moment. But I remember that there were a lot of people basically like justifying not working or not doing these things because like they were like, oh, like I'm taking a mental health day. And I get it, man. Like I truly get it where like some days I'll wake up and I'm like, it is so hard for me to get out of bed right now.
Sure.
Like I can just turn the lights off, pull the covers up and just stay here all day. But I think that we also have to be really, really careful about using that as again, a blanket excuse, because then it opens that up to being abused, and anything that can be taken advantage of will also be abused. And I think if we just allow mental health to be used as an excuse over and over and over and over and over again, whether that's professionally or whether that's like, relationships, whatever, I think it opens that up to being abused. And I don't know where that line is, and I'm definitely not a professional in this. But that's been my observation from afar.
Yeah. So I just had this thought. I think it's abused because whether or not like we have a diagnosis or we have an understanding of, okay, this is the community or this is the population that has these similar patterns and I belong in it in some fashion. We're also not considering that, okay, in my own immediate bubble, this is going on, but there's still these larger constructs that are playing into it that don't allow us to really be liberated.
Yeah.
So because they might engage in this excuse, it's because, the culture, society reinforces, for example, capitalism. If I'm not productive, I don't have value. I don't have purpose. So I think that is playing a role.
Yep.
And also just internalized messages from their parents. When they might have been receiving attention, it might have been probably negative attention. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, I'm going to do things that might hurt me, but I'm going to be getting attention. And we're all desperate. We're yearning for that. We really are. And we're not so seen in this, swipe, swipe, swipe world where it's just, we see each other as objects versus just like another being right here.
I know that you alluded to it with the swipe, swipe, swipe thing, but what role do you think social media plays in this and making it difficult to manage your own expectations, your own self-worth as compared to not only just like your peers, but also society, because you're seeing like the algorithms are reinforcing who you're,
oh my gosh, yeah.
You're seeing like, models, you're seeing, the professional bodybuilders, you're seeing influencers, you're seeing like what they want you to see. So how much of that do you feel like contributes to people's struggles with their own like self-worth?
I think it contributes a lot. I can't give any sort of percentage, but but a large amount. And it depends on your intention when you approach it. Like, is it very just unconscious? Like, okay, I'm bored. I'm going to pick up my phone, or I'm at a party and I feel uncomfortable. Any sort of like uncomfortable tension, we grab the phone.
Yeah.
Grab the phone. And sure, it can give us this relief, but we're also completely disconnected from the present moment, from our own experience, because it is a lot. It's a lot. And overall, we've never been taught how to deal with that. So because this is a lot, we look towards something else outside of us that is relatively or subjectively pretty or subjectively feel good sort of energy, and in a way that can validate us, even if it's negative, or the way it's perceived inside of us is negative, because we are seeing ourselves, but it's, it's like, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm not lean enough. We're still like giving ourselves attention.
I think some people look for that negative validation.
They look for it. Yeah. I think all of us, we act in ways according to whatever we believe in, whether it's conscious or not. I lost my train of thought. So yeah, I do overall think that social media plays a large role in how people perceive themselves. And I've gone through a spiral of that in the past.
Yeah.
And more recently, I would say over the last year, more and more and more, I don't care for social media anymore. Or when I'm on it, I consciously ask myself, what am I doing? Or why am I posting this? Is this for me? Because I think this is awesome and dope, and I believe in this message, and I just want to share myself because it feels good, or I just want to let this go out in the ethers? Or am I looking for this validation from my ex or someone else or my crush, and constantly checking back? Did they watch the story, or did they like it? Did they comment?
And I saw a study not too long ago, or it might have been like a meta-analysis actually, but comparing a lot of different approaches to eliminating social media for a set period of time for a control group, or not a control group, but the testing group, and then having a control group with them, and basically seeing like across this wide measure of subjective analysis, like how does eliminating social media affect people and affect their mood, affect their outlook on the world. And in every category, it's positive. Like eliminating social media has a positive outcome.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. And but it's so interesting though, because like, in my opinion, I think that the idea behind social media is a positive one, right?
It's great. It's a tool.
It's creating more connections. It's
Yes.
broadening your ability to connect with people. Like that is inarguably a great tool. Like that is good.
Absolutely.
But it's become less about connection. It's more about comparing, and
And
it's
consuming.
consuming and almost a race to the top, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
how many followers do I have? How many likes do I
Mm-hmm.
have? How many people have viewed my story? Like these types of things, just like overwhelming metrics. And we can see the metrics and other people can see the metrics too. So it
Yeah.
makes it even almost like more challenging. Um, and I think that that is something that's almost impossible to escape, that consistent comparison. You mentioned like, capitalism, where like you don't have value if you're not productive. And I think in a lot of ways, social media makes that, I don't want to say feelings of
It reinforces
it
it.
definitely reinforces things too, because for me, like I don't really have too many insecurities around like where I am in life at this point, right? Obviously I'm like, what, there are people my age who are doing better than I am, who are more successful. That's inarguable. But I try
And
not.
that's subjective too.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
does success mean?
true. And but for me, like I really try not to compare myself to those things, and I try
Yeah.
and look at my own life and like compare it to really just myself, and like, am I improving? Am I doing better than I was last year? Then great, I'm doing okay. But it's also really challenging to see those types of things and not look at your life and feel like it's inadequate in some way, or
Mm-hmm.
you're inadequate in some way, or be like, this person I went to high school with is now doing this. They're married. They're traveling the world. They're making $1 million a year. Like, why am I not doing that too?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why am I inadequate to be able to
Mm-hmm.
live that type of life? And one thing that I've really understood to probably like a unhealthy degree is that life experiences are so relative. It's
Yeah.
it's not absolute, and you can see this a lot by looking at like the rate of suicide, uh,
Mm-hmm.
celebrities,
Celebrities.
or,
Yeah.
or the rate of like drug addiction with
Overdose. What is it? The 27 Club.
yeah. Like you see these things, and you look at these people who objectively have these glamorous lives, where you're like, I would trade my life for this person's life immediately. They have everything they could ever want.
Yeah.
And one thing that I've started to understand a lot too is like, you can only achieve and experience so much in your lifetime, right? And money can definitely improve your life in a lot of ways, because it opens up
Sure.
experiences that not having money would
You have more time, if you will.
yeah, and it opens up social connections, and like you're able to do all of these really cool things that not having money kind of restricts you from. But what I've noticed is that it creates this higher and higher ceiling that you have to go further and further. It's like having like a rabbit that you're always chasing, and
Mm-hmm.
no matter how fast you run, it's speeding up, and you can't ever quite get it right. So you're always chasing something, and it's like you get to like the mountaintop, and then there's only down. You can only go down from that point. And that's a really depressing feeling, I have to imagine, right? Like I've never been to that point, but you look at like, certain celebrities who have really, really struggled with those things
Yeah.
in the past. Billionaires, right? Billionaires
Billionaires.
who have committed suicide, who have struggled with these things. And like for me, I can understand that. I can understand getting to what you consider the highest of highs, everything that like life would be able to provide you with in terms of experiences, in terms of
Mm-hmm.
happiness, in terms of all of these things that you seek, and knowing that that's either it, or you feel like that's it, or that like there's only down to go from that point. That would be extremely depressing. That would be a struggle to deal with.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that like the relative side of subjective experiences
Mm-hmm.
is, you can't compare things, right? You can't compare things. A lot of people get caught trying to compare things and trying to compare their life to other people's. And you know bringing this back to physique sports, people compare physiques.
Mm-hmm.
Women especially will look at other
Big. Yeah.
women, be like, man, like I would kill for her body. There's no way that she could ever suffer from like body image issues because she's perfect. And again, it's just it's relative. And that's something that I've noticed a lot. I don't know if you can speak to that, because I just kind of went off on a tangent, but I don't know if you can add any.
No, that's great. it actually reminded me of another podcast that I've been really interested in. One of the speakers talked about the issue with people that just have so much, celebrities, millionaires, billionaires. And she presented this idea. It wasn't absolute. They were just talking about different thoughts and ideas that came up. But she said, it's kind of narcissistic. And it's like hoarding tendencies too.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you collecting all of these things, money and cars and watches or whatever, shoes? For what? What are you looking for? And the word that you said a few times that stood out to me is that they feel lost.
Mm-hmm.
You're just lost. And most often than not, even if, we're looking for a certain physique, what we're looking for is for ourselves. And not to get like super wishy-washy and woo-woo, but all of these experiences are experienced, sure, like you can meditate or you can achieve something very big or win an Academy Award. But the experience is within you, and those things are just a method. It's just a method to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you can feel the same greatness and openness and awe sitting outside on the turf and soaking up the sun and drinking your favorite beverage.
Yeah. And like some of the most like oddly happy moments I've ever had have been just being like incredibly present and like in nature in a moment that was just like beautiful. So whether that's like sunset La Jolla Beach or like, being in Mexico and just like looking out at the water and like watching like whales breach, like just like moments like that, we were just like, holy shit, like this is just so fucking beautiful. Like this is just amazing. Like you just sit out there and you just breathe and you just don't think about anything else and you just observe. And
it's enough.
It is. It really is. And obviously like life is challenging and going through life as an adult is really fucking hard. And it's not fun. And like, here's the thing though, it's like, I don't think that life is supposed to be fun all the time. And that's where I think people get caught in these ruts and they get caught in these loops is because they're expecting to be provided with almost like endless happiness if they achieve X, Y, or Z, right? If you make X amount of money, you expect that to correlate with Y amount of happiness. But like chasing money is never enough. Chasing status is never enough. Chasing success. It's because you're always going to be looking at the next thing and you're never able to actually appreciate where you are in that moment because you're always focused on the next thing.
Right. That's the mechanism, the thought loop, if you will.
Especially for really driven people, whether that's in bodybuilding or whether that's in life or business or whatever. Those are also the types of people who really struggle to appreciate what's going on in that moment or appreciate like what they were able to accomplish, because whether that's being on stage and winning a show, and then before you're even off stage, you're thinking about the next one, right? You can't actually take a breath and be like, I just did something really cool. I just achieved something that I put a lot of work in. Like I'm happy for myself. I'm proud of myself. Like you don't, like most of those people don't allow those thoughts to happen because they're so focused on what's coming next, the future. And I guess that this is kind of like a different question, but I've found myself to be very much in that camp of always thinking about the future, having like almost anxiety about the future. And there are also people who are stuck in the past. Who can't get over past traumas, or not can't get over. That's a very bad way of putting that. They're stuck. They're stuck with past traumas, or something that is kind of like anchoring them to the past. And very, very, very few people can actually live in the present. Like their physical bodies are here, but their brains are somewhere else. Or most people, most people's brains are somewhere else. Do you have any good strategies for just like staying present and allowing like that anxiety, that that trauma of the past or the latching on to the past kind of wash away, even if it's momentary, even if it's
momentary, yep.
5-10 minutes to just give you that reprieve, just like be present. Like, do you have any really good strategies that you like recommend to people?
Blanket word or term, slow down.
Yeah.
Slow down. And that doesn't mean you need to sit in a dark room and meditate for an hour. It does not necessarily mean that, or just not do anything, like not have any goals. It just means to orient yourself to the experience of the moment. And most of the time, it doesn't even involve your thoughts. And I'm also not saying not to have thoughts, because that operates on its own too. What I'm alluding to is just experience, like we did as babies, experience the sensations in your body, because those are literally your emotions. But we've created labels, or the mind has created labels, because we need to communicate to detach from it. So like once you say, oh, I'm anxious, you're already detached from it. What the heck is anxiousness?
Yeah.
How do you know it's anxiousness in your body? Is it trembling? Is it like tension in your chest? Do you feel a pit in your stomach? How's your breath? You feel a lump in your throat? Like, that's what we really want to do. And just allow those sensations to be, as well as, the external experience as well. What sounds am I hearing? What am I seeing outside of me? The smell, the temperature. When we hone in on those experiences, those sensations, we find ourselves very present. And then our bodies are relaxed. They're open. We're not trying to like force this tension out of us. Because if we just allow space for it to be with just curiosity, awareness, they usually let go.
Yeah.
They usually move through us. And then we actually have the capacity to use our prefrontal cortex, the tool that is magnificent for humans. But when the body is dysregulated, it's shut down. This is why we spiral and we loop. Then we can, okay, why am I doing this? Or where do I want to go from here? What do I want to plan?
And
yeah,
like, I like just the blanket statement of slow down, because that itself can encapsulate a lot of things, whether that's like meditative breathing, whether that is going on a walk, whether that is, just laying down, closing your eyes, and just like allowing your heart to slow down. I mean, that's something that I definitely struggle with, is during a work day, like just getting really worked up and having all of these things happening at once, like pinging back and forth between email and text, all of this shit. And every once in a while, I'll feel myself feeling very overwhelmed. And it's almost like a cup is just like overrunning, I have to take a step back and just breathe, like literally just like deep breaths for like a couple of minutes, and just force myself to slow down, force my breathing to kind of get back into its natural rhythm, rather than really shallow, hyper breaths.
Yes,
like,
it's shallow.
And, walks have been definitely something that have helped me over the past couple of years. I mean, obviously living in Ohio, it's a bit difficult during the winter, but just getting outside, getting away from my computer, like taking my dog on a walk, like those things have helped me tremendously. This might be a random question, but like, what are your thoughts on things? I know that a lot of people are really into it now, but like cold plunges, ice baths, cold showers, like what are your thoughts on there as like a way to kind of like help with something like, depression, which I've seen people really promoting in terms of like helping with mental state?
Yeah. To my knowledge, the research is mixed. And I've seen it help people be able to tolerate like their bandwidth of uncomfortability or discomfort stretches a bit, because a lot of the stress and discomfort that we run away from is in the body. So if we learn how to feel safe, feel regulated in that uncomfortable environment, I think we can open up that window a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
When, shit hits the fan, really, because it's in a controlled environment. Because you can step out of that ice bath anytime you want. But you're willingly choosing, okay, I am going to be open to this. It's going to suck, but I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be present in it.
Yeah, I think it's similar in a lot of ways to like the stress that you get from a hard workout.
Mm-hmm.
It's that controllable, productive, good stress that our bodies were made to handle.
Yes.
Rather than the perpetual, chronic, low-level stress that we're all just so used to. And that, like you brought up a good point where it's like it almost something like that. And again, I don't know in detail what that research would look like. I've seen a good amount of stuff on it, but I definitely am not going over like research papers on like ice plunges and contrast therapy and things like that. But I can totally see how that would be not a reset, but like a good way of getting your body back in that natural rhythm of responding to an acute stress and snapping out of that acute stress. Same thing with training, response, snap back into normal. So like sympathetic, parasympathetic, and re-regulating that patterning rather than stress from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, but just at like a 3 rather than a 10.
Right.
But no, I think that's a really good way of thinking about it. It's definitely something that I've considered. I'm probably just too much of a little bitch to actually.
It's hard. It's hard. I've done the shower. I've done the shower and
I've done the showers too.
Put ice on my face.
Yeah, it's something that like I can convince myself to do in the right mindset and like circumstance. But then other times, like the majority of the time, like I don't feel like
those are the times.
Yeah, whenever you need it though. Yeah, but no. So there are definitely a couple more things I wanted to talk about. So right now with what you're doing and like how you're kind of going about it, we did briefly talk about you having your own practice or your own business, and I don't know if you want to touch on that. Just I don't think we ever really like completely got into.
Yeah, you're right.
You were talking about like your background of working at the clinic and stuff like that, and how they slowly have started to transition away from that. But do you want to talk about kind of like what you're doing now in terms of business?
Yes. So I started working full-time private practice in October of last year. I took the plunge and I work fully remote. I don't, at this moment in time, I don't have a physical, brick and mortar office, but I work remote. Most of my clients are from California, and I typically just take out of pocket. But if it is necessary, I do accept certain insurances, and in the state of California, that is Kaiser, that is Optum, Aetna, and Blue Cross.
Sure.
So what I generally provide is just virtual sessions for 15 minutes. I typically like doing a rhythm of once a week. And depending on the level of intensity that a client might be at, I could set them down, or if they just present with something very general, not that heavy, we can start with biweekly right off the bat. And we sometimes do like monthly check-ins. I also offer consultation. So if it's more of a business question or something very general, I'll hop on a call with that. And that's usually prorated. So it's not limited to 15 minutes. It could be less than, it could be more. And I only work with adults and I only work with individuals. So I don't see couples.
Okay. Who are the majority of your clients now? Like, or what are the majority of your clients coming to you for? Is it very broad, very general?
Very broad.
Okay.
Although I do have quite a lot of athletes. I do have just general population. I tend to see a lot of individuals that present with high anxiety, a lot of codependency, some form of addiction, whether that's substance, whether that's a relationship or work. They tend to have relationship issues. They tend to have poor self-esteem, poor sense of self. They struggle with boundaries. I do have some clients that have challenges with depression. And then just body image and eating
Yeah,
disorders. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that all makes a ton of sense. Obviously, do you feel like the remote side of things has been a little bit better, or do you feel like
Yeah.
remote presents its own challenges that in person maybe did?
Yeah.
You want to?
Pros and cons for both.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about some of the challenges, maybe?
Some of the challenges, I as a clinician, I'm not able to actually be with the energy of the client because it's just, it's a screen. I mean, yes, I can hear their voice, I can see their face, and I could get that sense of body language, but it's still, like half of it.
Yeah.
And it's not in the present, in the physical. Another challenge could be technical issues, or sometimes the client can be traveling or they're in the car. There's poor reception. Those are the main ones.
Yeah. Like just coming from someone who has done in-person and remote sessions, one of the big things for me that I find is difficult about remote is inability to dissociate your environment.
Yes.
So like a lot of people will take remote calls at home, but in a lot of times, in a lot of cases, being at home has its own stressors associated with it. So what I found is like going to a physical location, even if it's more inconvenient for me, has allowed me to almost like step into a world that is a little bit more, I don't say safe, but it's kind of like a little protected, right?
Yeah.
Where
its sole purpose is for that.
I can kind of get away from my own shit for a little bit because I can be in that room. I can be in a different world, and then when I come back out, it's like, okay, now I'm back in the real world. And that was the biggest thing for me. Like, obviously, it's super convenient to do remote. Like, I don't have to go anywhere. I can think on my own time a little bit more. But I can totally see how that could be a little bit more challenging from the client's end, but also like your end, the professional side, just having to navigate those things. But yeah, I think that like really that's the majority of like the intense questions I wanted to ask.
We have fun questions.
So, in terms of fun questions, let me think. Let me see. What festivals do you have going on this year?
Festivals?
Yeah.
I'm only doing 2 this year. So that's EDC and Lost Lands.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Lost Lands. You had to go to Lost Lands.
That's my favorite one.
No, that's exactly where my head is at too. I think I'm going to go to EDC, or no, not EDC, Electric Forest in Lost Lands.
Oh, nice.
I'm super excited about that. But yeah, like I want to let you go because I really appreciate your time. Obviously, I know that you are in Arizona right now and trying to.
Yeah, they should be coming back from their hike soon.
Yeah. But before we go, is there anything that you want to say? Any plugs that you want to make for your service? How people can find you? All of the good stuff.
Sure. And I'll send you the links too.
Yep.
I don't have a personal website, but I do have a directory on Psychology Today. You could just plug my name in, Amanda Rizo, Rizo. My Instagram is Rizo, Rizo _Amanda _. What else? I have a Twitter, but that's more for crypto. What else? My email is AMIRIZO027@gmail. And feel free to DM me. Feel free to send me an email, and I'll respond as soon as I can. I'm happy to work with people. I'm taking on clients. So
that was going to be my next question. Awesome. Yeah. So I will obviously put all that stuff in the show notes and stuff. So we will be able to handle that. Anybody who wants to find Amanda or contact her will be able to do so relatively easily. And yeah, taking clients. So anyone who feels like they need to have a conversation or just wants to do a consult with you, just to kind of see how it is.
Yeah. They're free. I do free consults.
Oh, that's dope. I don't do consults.
15 minutes.
Yeah. But awesome. No, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much again, Amanda.
Thank you, Bryce. This was awesome.